Thank you for allowing me to come and speak to you today. I never dreamed that I would be in ministry. That just never was in my mind. My career path was technology, chemistry, a lot of things, and I had a great career in those, but God had periods of time in which He interrupted or intervened in my best laid plans. And it was all to bring me to the point 10 years ago of Him calling me to missions. Let me trace back, though, my steps to when I was young. I had a marvelous Christian mother, a praying mother, and she taught us the Word and the principles of the Word. And so from the earliest that I can ever remember, I believed in God, I trusted God. And when I would wake up afraid at night, I would just start talking to the Lord. And that continued on. I didn't know I was a sinner. All I knew was I loved God and I trusted Him and I prayed. But at youth camp when I was 14 years old, in July of '64, all of a sudden, the reality hit me. God let me know that I was a sinner. And I wasn't going anywhere where He was unless I changed. That sin nature was there, and I had to deal with it. So, in an altar of prayer, I was born again. Amen. And it was an awesome transformation, tears and everything. And when I opened my eyes, when I finished praying, there was this big auditorium full of people, and some of them, I'd never seen them before. Some were fellow kids that we'd been playing ball all week, and some were kind of bullies, and some were, I loved everybody. I had never experienced love like this. That agape love will just pull everybody in close if you let it. And so I was born again at 14, and as I got older, I was asked to teach Sunday school classes, lead home Bible study groups. I was a lay leader in the churches as my career moved us around. But that was all the extent of it. I mean, I read the Bible, I prayed. I was a good Christian member of a church, wherever we were. But God had deeper things for me, and when our second child was on the way, about 3 months before he was born, this is would be our second one, the Lord spoke to me just like a man had been behind me and just said very clearly and loudly, but it didn't come through here. It was right here. And God said, I'm giving you a son. And a couple months later, my wife went into labor, and some of you have heard this story. And all the hospital's instruments, the leads attached to the baby's scalp, and everything said you're going to have a big, healthy girl. And I said, no, I'm going to have a son. I didn't even use the word boy, because God didn't say boy, He said son. And that has special meaning, I find. And contrary to what the facts of science that presented itself, I had God's Word on the matter, and they could not budge me. The nurses even crossed the line professionally and started mocking me, kind of making fun of me. Oh, he knows more than we do, ladies. Mr. Thomas, you realize we have 87 years collectively in labor and delivery, and we're telling you it's going to be a big, healthy girl. I said, no, it's not. It's going to be a son. I wish I'd had the boldness at that time, in my early 20s, that I would have stood up and explained why I'm rock solid on, God told me this. Anyway, it was a boy, and they were astonished. They never said another word to me. They turned their backs to me, and nobody apologized, nobody, silence. And I could have been a smart aleck and said, well, I told you so, that kind of attitude, but no, that was not what the Lord wanted me to do. I just quiet. They found out that the facts of science don't always come to pass. It's what God says. So anyway, a few years later, quite a few years later, in 2007, well, no, let me back up before that. In 1984, in the spring of 1984, God began to speak to me and simultaneously to my wife that we were to go to Rhema Bible Training Center and get rooted in God's Word. Well, what's Rhema? Who's over Rhema? Oh, Kenneth Hagin? Well, who's he? What's he look like? How old is he? What? I knew nothing. We knew nothing. But God said, I want you to go to Rhema and get rooted in my Word. So we had to sell our house and our possessions and give away our dog and turn in my company car. I mean, we were in the best home we'd ever had. I had the best paying, most enjoyable job I'd ever had. We were in a beautiful subdivision. It was like everything is primo. And in the middle of that, God said, I want you to move halfway across the country. Now, he didn't say those words, but basically, to go to Rhema, we had to move halfway across the country. And we didn't have the company paying for this move. And but we did. We were obedient. And that's when the miraculous started in our lives. God would do things like, we got to a point because my wife and I were going different ways. I had to get a job at night. The kids were in school, and we were going to Rhema in the mornings and trying to get to the prayer, what do they call that, David? In
prayer healing school?
Yeah, in the afternoon. Mm-hmm. And so we only had one car, and it was old. It was an older car, a lot of miles on it. It even stopped dead in the middle of the interstate one time in Tulsa. And so we began to pray for God to give us another car. So we're coming from church one day on a Sunday, and for some strange reason, my wife was driving. She always wants me to drive. So we pull up the stoplight, and I'm just looking over. There's a shopping center, and there's this huge parking area. And the Lord directs me right to the second car in the first row, and He says, I'm going to give you that car. And that's all He said. I turned to my wife as the light turns, and I said, honey, listen to what God just showed me and told me. So we rejoiced in that. We had His Word. And 5 months later, a couple called us from another state and said, are y'all doing anything this weekend? No. Would you mind if we come for a visit? No, come on. They travel down, and something about them was a little bit nervous, and they hadn't even been there probably 30 minutes, and they told us the reason they're there is God told them to buy us a car. The man went out, and when he came back about 2 hours later, the car that God had showed me in that parking lot was right there in my driveway. Because when I told my wife what God had showed me, she said, well, what kind of car was it? And I said, well, honey, there was one car blocking it. But what I do know is it was white. It was a mid-size General Motors sedan. And there was a Cutlass Sierra. White, right there in my driveway. 2 years old, low mileage. God's blessed, and all kinds of stuff like that started happening. That's just one of many. We began to see God providing answers and direction supernaturally, which we'd never had that active in us. Well, went to Rhema for 2 years, graduated with a perfect 4.0 average, had no direction from God as to What am I supposed to do? Where am I supposed to go? Because everybody was, yeah, I'm gonna be a pastor. I'm gonna start a church, or I got this, and I'm gonna. We had no direction. So we moved back to where we grew up, and we just waited on God, and the years started going by, and my jobs still. I went back into the workplace because I didn't know what God wanted me to do, and I wasn't just going to do something to be doing something. I had seen so many people get frustrated and just quit ministry because they were just wanting to do something. Yeah, I'm all rhema fired up, but you better be doing what God says. Anyway, what happened in our moving around, God still used me. Pastors would ask me, would you teach? Would you have a teaching seminar for a week? One pastor said, this was a pastor that really didn't like to get his hands too dirty with people's problems. Can you imagine that? He said, Bob, would you and Lee, would you all take over the counseling for the church? Boy, that's risky. You don't just turn that over to somebody in the church. I mean, that's the pastor's responsibility. Well, we did, and God did some miraculous things. And then I'm asked, well, would you start a home Bible study group? And yes, and miracles started taking place every time we would meet. I mean, it's pretty heady stuff. I just wasn't used to this, but I was just rejoicing in it and thanking God. Then in 2007, I'm sitting in my living room and I'm meditating on the Lord, and I suddenly realized, here I am, I'm 57 years old. I've never known what God had called me to do. And I felt ashamed that I'd never sought Him, sincerely sought Him to know, God, what do you want me to do? What did you create me for? What's your will for my life? You know, what have you called me to do in this life? And so I determined, now, we were going to leave for the beach vacation the next week. And this was the end of that preceding week. So I told my wife, I said, honey, we're going to have our vacation time, but I'm telling you, I'm going to stay in the beach house, and I'm going to be seeking God every day. You go and have fun. You walk on the beach, sit in the sun, read whatever you want to do, and I'll join you for dinner, but I'm going to be seeking God. And on the fourth day, He spoke to me, just like you would speak to me, and He said, I've called you to teach and to write my word. Wow. Well, now I knew. Well, I told my wife when she came in, I told her, and she said, well, that shouldn't be such a surprise. You've always had a gift for teaching. Well, somebody thinking you have a gift for teaching is a lot different than God saying, I've called you to teach my word. Because if He calls you, He will equip you and He will anoint you. And there's a lot of people that I run into out there, supposedly ministers. They weren't called. They're not anointed. They're playing church. They're playing whatever. And it's really sad in the body of Christ. Okay, but He put me to the test right away, because a couple of weeks after we got back, and then God having told me that, I'm booting my computer up one morning, and He speaks to me and says, I want you to write a book. And like Moses, I start making excuses. I say, Lord, I don't know how to write a book. I've never written a book. I don't know publishers, literary agents. I don't even know the market, or I don't even know where I would start. Well, He didn't have anything more to say. In each one of these instances, He just says a limited number of words, and then that's it. It's now up to me. So I began to pray, and on the third day, I'm right there at my desk. I'm booting my computer up. I always prayed before I did my work. I was working from home at the time. And I said, Father, I know without a doubt that was you. And if you want me to write a book, I'll do it. But you'll have to tell me what to write. And immediately he gave me the title of the book and 9 chapter headings. I just started writing. And in 90 days, the book was written. He would just inspire me with paragraphs, with verses of the Bible, and I'd go look them up, and then all of a sudden it would all blow up into a bigger, and there was 2 chapters. He just, like a computer program that you would download, he just downloaded the whole chapter at one time to me. I mean, it's kind of scary when you're the one supposed to do this, and you're trying to write as fast as you can, assuming you can get to pen and pencil soon, or pen and paper. But I really was the scribe, not the author, because I was just writing what God was giving me to write. And so in 90 days it was written, and in 90 days after that it was published. And people have written books tell me that that's just a miracle. I mean, they can't imagine. But that was 2007 in the first quarter. Then in the first quarter of 2010, I'm sitting out on a patio, minding my own business, just meditating. I always get in trouble meditating because you never know what God's going to say. But we are to meditate on the things of God. So I'm thinking of things, and all of a sudden God impresses on me. He doesn't speak the words. It's like He just puts it in my spirit. He says, I want you to take the light of the gospel to remote people groups of the world. I'm going, what? Lord, here again, the Moses defense. Lord, I don't know anything about missions. I've never been involved in missions. I wouldn't know who to call, where to go, how to keep a calendar. Well, he had said all he was going to say. So I had to start praying about it every day. And on the 3rd day,